So the 6 traits of writing are just a way to kind of break down what can be a somewhat overwhelming prospect or product for kids into smaller, manageable pieces. So the 6 traits are voice, ideas, conventions, organization, word choice, and sentence fluency. So what I have the kids do is, for different writing assignments throughout the year, choose different pieces to focus on. Some of those are self-chosen. Sometimes I will suggest, well, why don't you work on this? So, for example, a student might decide that conventions of writing, like spelling or punctuation use or capitalization or lack thereof, is getting in the way of their reader understanding their writing, and they'll choose to really focus their attention and their time for a writing piece on making their convention use strong. And it's just a way to help them focus their attention so they don't feel so overwhelmed, and so they can gain strength in certain areas. So when we talk about executive functioning in writing, there are kind of 2 different buckets that we can talk about. One is in planning, in like a longer piece, and one is in the actual organization and execution and initiation of writing itself. So in terms of how do I help them plan for longer writing, we make strong use of writing calendars. For example, we're working on this editorial project right now. So we'll brainstorm together. So what are the things that are going to happen right before you have a finished editorial? Well, you'll need to do research. You'll need to take notes. You're going to need to have a first draft. You're going to need to have peer edit, et cetera, et cetera. And so they'll get a calendar with a list of those things, and then they will independently sit down and decide and reflect what their own deadlines for each of those intermediary pieces should be, right? So if they're a person for whom writing goes really quickly, but the process of research is slower, right, they can adjust, right, to give themselves the time and the space they need. In terms of bringing executive functioning into writing, in that initiation, organization of writing, there are different techniques I use based on the student, but one thing that I have found works pretty well at this age is the use of templates and sentence frames. And I always tell the kids that's a starting point, right? They can pull from that, and they don't have to end there. So it gives them a place that they can begin, and just some things to fall back on. Oftentimes, that the hardest thing about writing is like that blank page or that initiation cost. And just being able to start with a template, right, is enough, so they know what to put down on the blank page, that they can then move into a more sophisticated product, right? And I always tell them that, templates and organizers and things like that are there to help them, not to hinder them. So if they are past a point where they want to make use of it, to delete it or to ignore it. It's more of like a resource that they know they can pull from, that's in their toolbox of writing strategies. So our classroom theme this year is a more perfect union. So we've looked at what makes maybe a more perfect society, how people have worked to create more perfect societies, thought about the idea of whether there is such a thing as perfect, right, a perfect society, and if it could be perfect for everyone, or if that's a necessarily limited concept. So we started our year with some imaginary world building. We did some just quick writes with prompts like, what would government look like in this world? What would religion look like? And then looked at the idea of archetypes, and they developed different characters based on archetypes that would exist in their society, then looked at like potential conflicts that might exist based on those archetypes or based on their society. And from there, they wrote short stories that actually for a lot of them ended up being not so short. But every student ended up with a story that was like at least 6 pages long. Some of them wrote stories that were upwards of 40 pages. And some of them have chosen to continue to work on that project since we were done. So that was a pretty fun way to start our year.